Good afternoon. Will the Standing Committee on Public Accounts please come to order? This meeting has been called to consider the following report, the Auditor General's report, follow-up of recommendations dated March 2018, managing the province's adult offenders. For the committee's information pursuant to our Rule 104.2, I would like to note the following substitutions for this afternoon's meeting. Mr. Wiebe for Mr. Lindsay, Ms. Lamoureux for Mr. Lamont. Before we get started, are there any suggestions from the committee as to how long we should sit this afternoon? Mr. Johnson.
And then revisit, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The suggestion was 1 hour and we revisit at that time. Agreed. Is that agreed? Okay. Does the Auditor General wish to make an opening statement? No. Thank you. Does the Deputy Minister wish to make an opening statement, and would he please introduce his staff joining him here today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me, I'm Dave Wright, Deputy Minister of Justice, and with me is Maria Campos, our Assistant Deputy Minister for Corporate and Strategic Services Division, and Scott Colliday, Associate Deputy Minister for Community Safety Division. Happy to make an opening statement and start by saying that the Department of Justice welcomes the recommendations and has since 2014 the recommendations from the Auditor General, and believes that the report and the follow-up to the report has provided considerable initiative and really led to improved outcomes. Since March 2018, the Department has been working within the framework of the Criminal Justice Modernization Strategy that the Minister of Justice of the day announced in March 2018. That strategy has provided the framework by which much of the work of the Department in relation to the criminal justice system has been performed, and under that framework, we've driven forward many of the recommendations set out by the Auditor General and responded to the concerns of the report. Custody and remand numbers have declined substantially since our previous updates. As of July of this year, the count in custody corrections was 87 youth and 1,780 adults, and that's as of late July. So we have significantly reduced numbers from both the 2014 report and, frankly, since our last report. So work continues along the lines of suggested by the Auditor General, primarily in relation to this report. We've worked to expand diversion options across the province, launching, for example, restorative justice centers and restorative justice north initiatives, enhanced planned and commenced and then have expanded the Responsible Reintegration Initiative, which deals with the reintegration of offenders coming out of custody, and a number of other initiatives, including support to community mobilization and other community-based initiatives. Developments such as the implementation and expansion of weekend court work, whereby prosecutors and defense lawyers are available and justices of the peace available to deal with cases more efficiently on the weekend and in the evenings, have led to reductions in time to disposition, have been contributed to them. Also efforts such as efforts to reduce fail to attend charges have been critical in expediting judicial processes, reducing time to disposition, and speeding, made some necessary improvements in terms of dealing with timely disposition. The Department has also expanded capacity in the problem-solving courts that the Auditor General refers to, including mental health, drug addiction, and more recently in the establishment under the leadership of the Provincial Court, the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Court, which commenced last March. Strategic priorities include the development of a new youth justice strategy, strategic changes to address challenges in bail processes, updating strategies and expansion of restorative justice, improving services to address mental health and addiction, both of offenders and those in the community, and improving access to justice in the northern region. and continued expansion of our support for offenders leaving custody. The Manitoba Justice has worked to expand our transparency by reporting publicly as required or as is set out in our criminal justice modernization strategy, and more recently, as of December, under the government-wide balanced scorecard initiative. Before ending statements, I do want to acknowledge and highlight accomplishments across the department in the context of the COVID pandemic. The department made with I say department, but it's work with our colleagues and partners in the courts and defense bar, police, and across the system, numerous changes to address the demands of the pandemic. So existing processes involving arrests, bail hearings, technological advancements, remand custody. For example, the suspension of the direct lockup process was a major and overdue change to Manitoba's system. Many of the changes made in the context of the pandemic have had a beneficial impact on the functioning of the justice system and support the recommendations in the Auditor and the OAG's report. So again, the department continues to appreciate the work of the OAG and the recommendations made in the report. There's my statement.
Before we proceed further, I'd like to inform those who are new to this committee of the process that's undertaken with regard to outstanding questions. At the end of every meeting, the research officer reviews the answer for any outstanding questions that the witness commits to provide an answer, and will draft a questions pending response document to send to the Deputy Minister. Upon receipt of the answers to those questions, the research officer then forwards the responses to every PAC member and to every other member recorded as attending that meeting. Before we get into questions, I'd like to remind members that questions of an administrative nature are placed to the Deputy Minister, and that policy questions will not be entertained and are better left for another forum. However, if there are a question that borders on policy and the Minister would like to answer that question, or the Deputy wants to defer it to the Minister to respond, that is something that we would consider. The floor is now open for questions. Ms. Naylor.
Do I have to stand? I was trying to remember. Okay, sorry. First of all, I want to welcome the new Auditor General in your role. Thank you for, congratulations to you. And if you could comment on the current status of Recommendation 7. Have you seen the work of any long-term capital plan to address bed shortages and overcrowding?
The Auditor General.
Which number is that? That's the capital. Which number is it? Oh, yeah, okay.
The Auditor General.
So our follow-up that we did, the follow-up report was issued in March 2018. The work that we looked at, or the work we did, was up to the status as of September 30th, 2017. At that time, we had not seen a comprehensive long-term capital plan. And I know there's been activity since then, but it's nothing that we would have looked at or that I could comment on. So I would recommend that question to be put to the department.
Ms. Naylor.
I'd like to ask the Deputy what the status is.
Yes, so
The Deputy Minister.
Thank you. So the stage one of the, I believe you have so there was a two-stage process established for the preparation of a comprehensive plan. Stage one dealt with a scope confirmation exercise. That exercise was completed in some time ago, and the intention was to move on to a second stage, to master planning, that was based on the expectation that there'd be a requirement for continued expansion of capacity, custody capacity. Since after completion of stage 1, it became apparent that the demands for custody had declined. We had fewer people in adult custody, approximately 200 or more fewer people, and it became apparent to us over time that that reduction in demand was sustainable and would continue, and that led us into roughly into the late end of the last year. So we have not proceeded, and I don't anticipate that we will proceed with stage 2 of the master planning, as it was based on the expectation of continued need for expansion. Both the period prior to the pandemic and then the experience in the pandemic has indicated that once we have a better sense of what the long-term capacity needs will be, we know they are reduced from where they were, but once we have that, we would be looking at a planning of sort relating to the facilities that we do have.
Ms. Naylor.
Okay, so just to clarify for my own understanding, so the recommendations, that recommendation number 7, the issue with the bed shortages and overcrowding has been greatly reduced, and you don't anticipate that changing in the near future.
The Deputy Minister.
No, we don't see any change to our response in the near future.
Ms. Naylor.
I thank you. In your opening document here, you have addressed one of my questions, which was what the count is in custody at this point as of July, which is pretty current. But I wanted to ask the deputy if COVID-19 has caused any incidences of overcrowding in the remand center.
The Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. COVID has had a couple impacts. One, it has required a different handling of persons in the facility, so it's required us to, on public health advice, to isolate folks more frequently as they enter the facilities. So it has required a different handling. Overall, though, the capacity, the number of people in facilities has declined, as it has across most jurisdictions, fairly significantly. So on the one hand, it's required us to handle persons differently, but on the other hand, there's a reduction of capacity, and so the answer is no, it hasn't created more difficulty in overcrowding.
Individual. Sorry? Oh, sorry. How many individuals are being double and triple bunked at this time?
The Deputy Minister.
Thanks. So the most recent data I have is on that question is April 2020. So there'll be a further decline in population since then. At that time, across the facilities, there were 374 individuals in single cells, 665 in double cells, 201 in triple cells, and 765 in either 4-person or dorms.
Ms. Naylor.
So those numbers are from April, so I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, but I wanted to ask how the closure of the Dauphin Correctional Center may have changed those numbers. Do you have any sense of that?
The Deputy Minister.
Not significantly, given the relatively small capacity that the Dauphin Correctional Center had, and in the Dauphin Correctional Center, significant portion of the population was in dorms and larger rooms, so it wouldn't have changed the distribution as between single and larger.
Ms. Naylor.
So I see that currently, as of July 27th, that for adults in custody, you're at 93% of capacity. So I'm just wondering if all sites are within their capacity or if there are certain centers that are over capacity.
The Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have the Auditor General points out in his report there's some subjectivity in the question of rated capacity. And so we've, I can talk about the actual versus rated capacity, but in fact, in many of the facilities, we have available beds beyond the rated capacity that were established during that period of increase. So in terms of the rated capacity, though, I can tell you that as of today, we have sorry, the question was the number of facilities that are over capacity as of today?
Yes.
Today's.
Individual breakdown. Does that just have the
This is the actual beds.
No.
Just a moment. Before I recognize anybody, if you could just signal to me when you're actually ready, because you may be getting briefed on your answer, and I can't recognize you for answer purposes until you're actually ready to speak. So the Deputy Minister.
So I will address this, so I can go through the adult facilities. The Brandon Correctional Center, today we have 334